With Harvey Oswald's so-called defection to Russia, his staged FPCC activities, and his communist-loving history going all the way back to the Marine Corps, it was easy to paint the Russian-speaking Oswald as a communist with ties to Castro, which is exactly what happened. Oswald's ties to the FBI, CIA and likely to military intelligence made high-level people within these organizations enter into a full-scale cover-up. The chosen patsy, Russian-speaking Harvey Oswald, had for years demonstrated his willingness to follow difficult orders, and following orders was critical in the days and hours before and after the assassination. Oswald, following orders, had to be in the right place at the right time for his designated role as the patsy unknown to him, to succeed. After President Kennedy was assassinated, the conspirators knew that the patsy had to be eliminated. They knew Oswald would be arrested, and they knew that it would only be a matter of time before he realized that he had been set up to take the blame for the assassination of President Kennedy. Oswald, facing murder charges, would surely then explain his early life, where and how he learned to read, write, and speak Russian, as well as his connections and the names of contacts within the CIA and FBI. With this information, the search for the plotters would have been relentless. When the conspirators developed their plan to assassinate President Kennedy and blame Oswald as the patsy, they knew their plan had to include the elimination of Oswald, which is the subject of this essay. My interest in JFK has always focused on Oswald and, to a lesser degree, on Jack Ruby. Recently the authors of this article looked briefly at a photograph of the old Dallas City Hall at 106 Harwood Street in Dallas, which was built in 1914. On Sunday morning, the 24th of November, Oswald was to be transferred from police headquarters, City Hall building, 3rd floor, to the county jail. There were dozens of police officers in and around this building providing security for Oswald's transfer. The Warren Commission said that Ruby had entered the parking area below the City Hall building by walking down the Main Street ramp. But if Ruby's intention was to enter the building and kill Oswald, then there was no way that Ruby could be sure that he would be able to avoid dozens of police officers and enter the building by walking down the ramp. As we looked at the photo of the old City Hall, our first thoughts were that it would have been nearly impossible for Ruby to have avoided the police and enter the building by walking down the ramp. The main entrance to City Hall, guarded by police officers, was on Harwood Street with two smaller entrances on Main Street and Commerce Street. The only other entrance, guarded by police officers, was the ramp to the underground parking which provided access to the city jail, in the basement, from both Main and Commerce Street. I could not imagine how Ruby was able to enter City Hall without being seen and stopped by police officers. In this essay we will share our work and our thoughts with you as to when, where, and how Jack Ruby was able to gain entry into the basement of City Hall and murder Harvey Oswald. We will begin by taking a close look at the City Hall building, its history, its architecture, and in particular the points of entry into this building. Google. The City Hall building, pictured above, was built in 1914 and was originally known as the Municipal Building. As can be seen from the architectural drawings below, there were 5 floor levels and 2 basement levels. The basement levels extended past the exterior walls of City Hall to both Commerce and Main Streets. The cement sidewalks on both Commerce Street and Main Street covered these basement areas. An underground ramp was built on the east side of the building and ran from Commerce Street downward to a double-door entry on basement level 1. The Dallas Police Department was located on the 3rd floor of City Hall, with a small jail on the 5th floor. In the sub-basement, known as Basement Level 2, the police department had a shooting range. In 1956 a new building was constructed on the east side of City Hall, Municipal Building, between Main Street and Commerce Street. the ramp was extended north from the double-door entry to Main Street. The new annex building was joined forward/attached to the older City Hall building and was built over the underground ramp that now ran from Commerce to Main Street. The original image below, CE 2179, was published in the Warren volumes and shows the area where Oswald was shot. For many years researchers have looked at this image and never realized this drawing was of two different buildings. The police office, jail elevator, and small hallway were in the basement of City Hall, municipal building, which is shown on the left side of the ramp in the photo below. The police parking area and the ramp were in the basement of the newly constructed annex building shown on the right side of the ramp. The image below shows the two buildings joined together, the City Hall building, 1914, and the annex building, 1956, with the underground ramp between the two buildings. This drawing forward/floor plan of the site of the Oswald shooting, identified as basement in CE 2179, was never properly identified by the Warren Commission because the image above is actually two separate buildings. To make matters even more confusing, both of these buildings were known for years as the municipal building. Numerous FBI, Dallas Police, WC documents, witnesses, etc. refer to the municipal building without properly identifying the building. The inscription municipal building was, in fact, placed above the entry door of each building, as can be seen in the photographs below. This has for many years caused much confusion among researchers when reading documents, police reports, FBI reports, etc., because a reference to the municipal building without further description could be either building. The original municipal building, built in 1914, was also known as City Hall and often as Dallas Police Headquarters. In this essay we will refer to the building on Harwood Street, constructed in 1914, as City Hall. The newer building, constructed in 1956, had entries on both Commerce Street and Main Street, and was originally known as the Municipal Annex Building. We will refer to this building as the Annex Building. City Hall, Annex Building, Parking Lot, Western Union. The overhead view of these buildings, below, shows the location of City Hall, blue, on Harwood Street, the Annex Building, red, east of City Hall, the parking lot, yellow, east of the Annex Building, and Western Union east of the parking lot. Note the underground ramp that runs from Commerce Street to Main Street is in the basement of the Annex Building. Across the street from City Hall, north, was the Allright parking lot, where Jack Ruby parked his 1960 Oldsmobile on the morning of the 24th of November, 1963. The Western Union office is about 300 feet east of the Main Street ramp. Google. Around 11 a.m. on the 24th of November, 1963, Jack Ruby parked his car at Allright Parking, walked across Main Street to the Western Union office, and wired $25 to one of his dancers, Karen Carlin, who lived in Fort Worth. Ruby then left Western Union, walked 300 feet west, and somehow got into the police parking area in basement level 1 of City Hall. Google. As Ruby left Western Union, and began walking toward City Hall, Oswald was escorted from Captain Fritz's office on the 3rd floor of City Hall to the basement. Ruby managed to get into the basement about 1 minute before Oswald arrived in the basement. The Warren Commission believed that Ruby entered the basement of the police station from the Main Street ramp, pictured above, guarded by Officer Roy Vaughn. Vaughn, however, swore he did not see Ruby enter the building. Police Inspector Jack Reville interviewed Vaughn and said, "I am satisfied that Roy Vaughn did not see Jack Ruby nor did he knowingly permit him to enter the basement." Officer Napoleon Daniels agreed with Vaughn and said, "No, Definitely not, there was nobody entering the ramp. The Warren Commission, however, concluded that Ruby did go down ramp and that his arrival in the basement was a combination of luck and coincidence. But the fact that Oswald's transfer was delayed over an hour beyond the announced time of 10 a.m. makes Ruby's arrival on cue for the shooting appear to be much more than coincidental and absurdly improbable. Ruby's whereabouts and his activities after President Kennedy was shot and killed will provide the answer as to whether Oswald's murder was planned and premeditated or spontaneous. We will also try to show how Ruby was able to avoid dozens of Dallas police and enter the basement of City Hall only 1 to 2 minutes before Oswald arrived. Ironically, it was Jack Ruby who pointed us in the right direction the day he shot Oswald. Ruby said, "Who else could have timed it so perfectly by seconds? If it were timed that way, then someone in the police department is guilty of giving the information as to when Oswald was coming down." The 22nd of November, 1963. Jack Ruby. Within hours of President Kennedy's assassination, Jack Ruby closed his Carousel Club and began spending a lot of time at City Hall. Defense attorney Travis Kirk worked in the Dallas District Attorney's office for 6 years. When interviewed by the FBI, Kirk said that Ruby and Fritz were close friends and that Ruby was allowed complete run of the police station and particularly the Homicide and Inspectors Bureau. Kirk said that Fritz was a domineering, dictatorial officer with a photographic memory. Robert Lee Shawman, who worked on and off as a musician at the Carousel Club, said that an older detective by the name of Fritz frequented the Carousel Club. Detectives Eberhart and Cody were close friends of Ruby. Lieutenant James Gilmore was a frequent visitor to the Carousel Club and was very friendly with Ruby. Two of Ruby's friends, Alfred Davidson and longtime friend Reagan Thurman, said Ruby was casually acquainted with the chief of police and other high-level police officers. Lieutenant George C. Arnott was also a very close friend of Ruby. Theodore Fleming, a DPD officer for 8 years, told the FBI there was a good likelihood that any officer acquainted with Ruby would have allowed him into the building if Ruby had requested permission to do so. Captain Fritz. John William Will Fritz was captain of the Homicide and Robbery Bureau, and had a reputation as a skilled interrogator, and a reputation for being able to remember minute details of investigations that occurred years earlier. His bureau was considered the elite unit of the Dallas Police Department. District Attorney Henry Wade told the Warren Commission that Fritz runs a kind of one-man operation, and was reluctant to tell others what he was doing. WC Attorney Joseph Ball asked Fritz if he or other officers questioned Oswald during interrogation. Fritz answered, "I don't think those officers talked to him very much while I was out of the office. I think they might have asked him a few questions, but didn't ask him much." Captain Fritz was clearly running a one-man operation. He was in control of interrogation, and he decided which questions would be asked and which questions would not be asked of a suspect. Fritz decided when to take notes, was always in control of his handwritten notes, and clearly in control of what information he gave to the press. Because of his experience and intimidating demeanor, most Dallas police officers respected and feared Fritz more than Dallas Police Chief Jesse Curry. During the first 10 years of JFK research, I kept an open mind and had not formed an opinion as to Captain Fritz. I did not, however, understand why the man accused of killing the President of the United States was not tape recorded, or why a stenographer wasn't present to record every word of Oswald's interrogation. There was a recording room directly across the corridor from Fritz's office, and there were several stenographers who worked at police headquarters on the 3rd floor. When WC Attorney Joseph Ball asked Fritz if he had a tape recorder, Fritz answered, "No, sir, I don't have a tape recorder." "We need one," If we had one at this time we could have handled these conversations far better. I have requested one several times but so far they haven't gotten me one. If no tape recorder, then why was there a recording room across the hall from Fritz's office? If Fritz was serious about wanting to record conversations with Oswald, he could have asked any one of several dozen news reporters if he could borrow their recording device. I began to wonder if the lack of a tape recorder and lack of a stenographer during interrogations was Fritz's idea. By not recording questions and answers from a suspect, and a reluctance to tell others what he was doing, Captain Fritz was indeed running a one-man operation. Without a tape recorder or stenographer, there was only Fritz's memory and his sketchy handwritten notes that recorded answers allegedly given by suspects. A wallet at the Tippit murder scene. On the early afternoon of the 22nd of November, Dallas police were investigating the murder of Officer J.D. Tippit at 10th and Patton in Oak Cliff. Captain Westbrook, in charge of the personnel office at police headquarters, arrived at the scene at 1:37 to 1:38 p.m. driving his unmarked, dark blue, squad car. FBI agent Bob Barrett arrived at 1:42 p.m., parked his car, and walked toward Tippit's patrol car. Barrett explained, "I went on over there and Captain Westbrook was there with several of his officers. It hadn't been very long when Westbrook looked up and saw me and called me over. He had this wallet in his hand. Now, I don't know where he found it, but he had the wallet in his hand, the wallet was there. There's no getting around that." Westbrook asked me, "Do you know who Lee Harvey Oswald is? And, do you know who Alec Heidel is?" And I said, "No, I never heard of them." Westbrook then showed Barrett the wallet and the contents of the wallet. Barrett said, "I'm adamant that there was a wallet." There is no doubt that Barrett saw the second wallet. An extremely important piece of evidence that would link Oswald to Heidel and to the weapons that killed both Tippit and Kennedy. As Westbrook showed the wallet to Barrett and to fellow DPD officers, WFA-TV Channel 8 news photographer Ron Reland filmed the wallet. In the film clip, Sergeant Bud Owens is holding the wallet while Captain Doughty was looking at the wallet. Identification cards in this wallet identified Lee Harvey Oswald and Alec James Heidel as the prime suspects in the murder of Officer Tippit. The identification cards, one for Alec James Heidel and one for Alex James Heidel with a photo of Harvey Oswald, would link Oswald to the name Heidel, the name of the person who allegedly ordered the rifle from Klein's Sporting Goods that was found on the 6th floor of the book depository. A few minutes later, when the police dispatcher reported a suspicious person had entered the Texas Theater, Westbrook and numerous police officers hurried to the theater. Harvey Oswald was arrested in the Texas Theater, taken out the front, placed in Westbrook's unmarked, dark blue, squad car, circa 12:52 p.m., and driven to City Hall. Colonel Robert E. Jones, Army Intelligence, San Antonio, TX. Minutes after Oswald was arrested, something very unusual happened. An unidentified person from the Dallas Police Department contacted Army Intelligence Lieutenant Colonel Robert E. Jones, the operations officer of the 112th INTC Group in San Antonio. This unidentified person told Lieutenant Colonel Jones that when Lee Harvey Oswald was arrested, 1:52 p.m., in Dallas, he was carrying a Selective Service card bearing the name Alec James Heidel. Lieutenant Colonel Jones then contacted the Department of Justice, the FBI, and reported the information given to him by the unidentified man in the Dallas Police Department. Later that afternoon, 4:25 p.m., the special agent in charge of the FBI office in San Antonio sent a memo to FBI Director Hoover and to the special agent in charge of the FBI office in Dallas, describing the information he had received from Lieutenant Colonel Jones. 4 hours after President Kennedy was assassinated, J. Edgar Hoover was advised that Oswald was also using the name Alec James Heidel. 15 years later, on the 20th of April, 1978, Lieutenant Colonel Robert E. Jones told the House Select Committee on Assassinations that he got the information about Alec James Heidel from someone inside the Dallas Police Department between 1:30 p.m. and 2 p.m. A selective service card with the name Alec James Heidel first appeared in the wallet that Captain Westbrook had and first showed at the Tippit murder scene around 1:40 p.m. Neither FBI agent Barrett nor any of the police officers at the Tippit murder scene were known to have seen or touched the contents of this wallet. Westbrook had the wallet. He knew there was a selective service card in the wallet with the name Alec James Heidel, and Westbrook left the Tippit murder scene minutes later with the wallet in hand. We are convinced that Westbrook was the unidentified person who telephoned Army Intelligence Colonel Jones after Oswald was arrested at 1:52 p.m. Harvey Oswald's wallet. While en route to police headquarters, Detective Paul Bentley removed Harvey Oswald's wallet from his pants pocket. When Oswald arrived at headquarters, circa 2 p.m., Bentley gave Oswald's wallet to Lieutenant Baker in homicide and robbery, circa 2:05 p.m. Bentley then went to Captain Westbrook's office to prepare reports. Lieutenant Baker placed Harvey Oswald's wallet on the table in the interrogation room. As Harvey Oswald sat handcuffed, in a chair, Dallas Police Officer C.T. Walker began inspecting the contents of Oswald's wallet. Moments later, Det. Gus Rose and Det. Richard Stovall appeared and they too began inspecting the contents of Oswald's wallet. A total of 12 items were found in Oswald's wallet and listed by the FBI, with one of the items listed as 3 photographs. Therefore, the total number of items found in Oswald's arrest wallet was 14 items. Oswald's room on Beckley Street. Before Fritz began to question Oswald, circa 2:20 p.m., a police officer told Fritz that Oswald had a room on Beckley. But when WC Attorney Joseph Ball asked Fritz the name of this officer, Fritz said he did not remember the officer's name. How could Fritz possibly forget the name of a fellow police officer who told him that Oswald had a room on Beckley only minutes after Oswald was brought to police headquarters? Who was this officer? Why would any Dallas police officer have any reason to know or be in contact with Oswald before the 22nd of November? This officer not only knew that Oswald had a room on Beckley, this officer also had access to the Homicide and Robbery Bureau, which, on the 22nd of November, was guarded by police officers. This unidentified police officer had access to Captain Fritz only minutes after Oswald arrived at police headquarters. It would appear the police officer who told Fritz that Oswald had a room on Beckley was a high-ranking officer. Oswald was by far the most important suspect in the history of the DPD, and yet Fritz did not ask his fellow police officer how he knew Oswald and how he knew that Oswald had a room on Beckley. Fritz telling the WC that he did not remember the name of this officer is, to us, withholding what we now know to be very important information. The police officer who told Fritz that Oswald had a room on Beckley was likely the same officer who drove police car #207 past Oswald's rooming house an hour earlier, at 1 p.m. Several years after first reading Fritz's testimony, I identified the 2 officers who I believe drove by 1026 N Beckley at 1 p.m. in car #207. Those police officers were Captain Westbrook and Sergeant Croy. I believe it was Captain Westbrook who told Fritz that Oswald had a room on Beckley, but Fritz had a good reason for not identifying Westbrook to the WC. I was now suspicious of Captain Fritz. The second wallet and 2 Alec James Heidel ID cards. After Westbrook returned to police headquarters, he gave or perhaps shared the wallet from the Tippit murder scene. The second wallet, with Captain Fritz. We believe, with the appearance of a second wallet from the Tippit murder scene, that Fritz realized and understood that Oswald was being framed for the Tippit murder. Fritz took possession of the two Alec James Heidel ID cards from the second wallet, pictured below, but the second wallet disappeared. Both ID cards have the name Alec James Heidel, and one card, the Selective Service System card, has a photo of Harvey Oswald. The next morning, Saturday, Fritz interrogated Oswald and asked him about these cards. Oswald is charged with murder. Officer Jerry Hill was one of 5 police officers who took Oswald from the Texas Theater to police headquarters. After Oswald was turned over to homicide and robbery, Sergeant Hill went to Captain Westbrook's office and began preparing a report on Tippit's death. A few minutes later, when Westbrook returned to his office, he told Hill to change the homicide report to say that Oswald was the suspect in both the Tippit case and the murder of President Kennedy. Later that afternoon, 5 p.m., Jerry Hill, a former news reporter, was interviewed by NBC TV. Hill said, "The only way we found out what his name was to remove his billfold and check it ourselves. He wouldn't even tell us what his name was." A reporter asked Hill, what was the name on the billfold? Hill replied, Lee H. Oswald. Oswald. Hill said nothing about the name Alec James Heidel because neither of the Alec James Heidel ID cards were in Oswald's wallet. Hill then talked at length about Oswald's defection, his marriage to a Russian woman, and his life in the Soviet Union. When the reporter asked Hill how he knew about Oswald's activities in the Soviet Union, Hill said, "Westbrook told me. It is obvious that on the day President Kennedy and Officer Tippit were murdered, Captain Westbrook knew far too much about Harvey Oswald." And for Westbrook, head of the personnel department at police headquarters, to drive past Oswald's rooming house at 1 p.m., to be at the book depository, to be at the Tippit murder scene, to have a second Oswald wallet, and to be at the Texas Theater when Oswald was arrested, is a clear indication that he was involved as a conspirator. Jack Ruby at police headquarters. Around 7:30 p.m., with reporters, news people, and cameras filling the police station, Jack Ruby tried again to enter Captain Fritz's office on the 3rd floor of City Hall where Oswald was being interrogated, but was stopped by 2 uniformed officers. How did Ruby know that Oswald was in Fritz's office? Why did Ruby attempt to enter Fritz's office? At 10:30 p.m. Ruby stopped at Phil's Delicatessen to purchase sandwiches and make phone calls. One of the phone calls was overheard by Delicatessen employee John Frickstad. During the call Ruby said, if anything should come up Ruby, could be reached at the Cliff radio station, owned by Gordon McClendon, who was a boyhood friend, classmate, and close friend of senior CIA officer David Atta E. Phillips. Ruby took the sandwiches and drove to Dallas City Hall. Later that evening District Attorney Henry Wade was giving a late-night press conference, 11:15 p.m. Ruby was not only in the crowd of reporters, he was standing on a table with a clear view of Oswald. In fact, Tony Record said that Ruby insisted on standing on the table, even though he didn't have a camera. When Wade said that Oswald was a member of the Free Cuba Committee, a group populated by CIA assets and supporters such as Claire Booth Luce, Admiral Ali Burke, and Hal Hendricks, Jack Ruby corrected him and said, "That's fair play for Cuba Committee, Henry." How and why would Jack Ruby know about the Fair Play for Cuba Committee? Newsreel footage from WFAA-TV, Dallas, and NBC shows that during the press conference Ruby was impersonating a news reporter, probably Cliff Radio. Some speculate that Ruby may have hoped to kill Oswald that night. Ruby, in fact, told the FBI that he had his loaded snub-nosed Colt Cobra .38 revolver in his right-hand pocket during the press conference. The 23rd of November, 1963. Saturday morning. Fritz interrogates Oswald. By Saturday morning, Captain Westbrook and Captain Fritz were very familiar with the two Alec James Heidel ID cards from the second wallet. Police Sergeant Bud Owens was in the interrogation room when Captain Fritz asked Oswald about these two cards. Owens was one of the police officers filmed by Ron Reland as he and Captain Doherty were looking at the second wallet at the Tippit murder scene. Fritz showed the Selective Service ID card with Oswald's photo to Harvey Oswald, but Oswald refused to answer any questions about the card. Secret Service Inspector Kelly wrote, Fritz showed Oswald a Selective Service card that was taken out of his wallet which bore the name of Alex Heidel. Oswald refused to discuss this after being asked for an explanation, by both Captain Fritz and by FBI agent James Buckhout. Oswald refused to discuss these cards with Fritz because it is likely that he had never seen either of these cards and realized he was being framed. Both of these ID cards came from the second Oswald wallet that first appeared at the Tippit murder scene in the hands of Captain Westbrook. The Selective Service card with the name Alec James Heidel contained a photo of Harvey Oswald, and this was the one and only item that directly linked Oswald to the rifle found on the 6th floor of the TSBD. After I learned that Fritz knew about the two Alec James Heidel cards and the second wallet, I began to wonder about his connection and the extent of his collusion with Westbrook, the first person and the last person to be seen with the second wallet at 10th and Patton, the person who told Fritz that Oswald had a room on Beckley, and the person who brought the second wallet to the police station. I knew that Westbrook and Croy were involved with Tippit's murder and involved with the second wallet. I was now very suspicious of Captain Fritz and his interactions with Westbrook and Croy. Note: Secret Service agent Thomas J. Kelly took notes of Oswald's interrogation, and recorded that Oswald refused to discuss the ID cards with Captain Fritz or with FBI agent Buckhout. Captain Fritz also took notes of Oswald's interrogation. Fritz wrote that Oswald told Owens the Alex James Heidel ID card belonged to him, but this was not recorded in Agent Kelly's notes. It appeared to me that this handwritten note was an attempt by Fritz, or maybe persons unknown, to link Harvey Oswald to the rifle found in the book depository. This note, allegedly written by Fritz, appeared for the first time 34 years later, in 1997, when given anonymously to the Assassination Records Review Board. By Saturday morning, Captain Fritz was well aware of the second wallet, and knew this throwdown wallet would be used to frame Harvey Oswald for the Tippit murder. I believe that Fritz knew, or at least should have known, that this throwdown wallet was a good indication that Oswald was never at the Tippit murder scene and never shot Tippit. This is why Fritz never asked Oswald simple and very basic questions about the Tippit murder. Fritz did not ask Oswald to describe the streets he took when walking from his rooming house to 10th and Patton. Fritz never asked Oswald whether he was walking east or west on 10th Street when he first saw the police car. Fritz did not ask Oswald if he knew Tippit or why a police officer called him over to the patrol car. Fritz never asked Oswald what he and the police officer talked about through the open passenger window. Fritz did not ask Oswald why he shot Tippit. Fritz never asked Oswald to describe the gun he used to murder Tippit. Fritz did not ask Oswald to describe the jacket he was wearing when he left the rooming house. Fritz did not ask Oswald what happened to the jacket. Fritz did not ask to describe the route and streets he took when he walked to the Texas Theater. Fritz did not ask Oswald if he bought a ticket to enter the theater. Oswald was never shown the jacket found/planted by Captain Westbrook in the parking lot behind the Texaco station on Jefferson Boulevard. Captain Fritz dared not ask Oswald any questions about the Tippit murder because Harvey Oswald was never at the Tippit murder scene, and his answer to any question about the Tippit murder would be noted by FBI and Secret Service agents sitting in the interrogation room. I now understood Captain Fritz's reason for not interrogating Oswald, or any suspect, with a tape recorder or a stenographer in the same room. Fritz could pick and choose the questions he wanted to ask a suspect and then write a few notes that supposedly recorded a suspect's answers to questions. These notes, however, could never be verified, but would likely never be challenged or questioned. A second Oswald wallet from the Tippit murder scene in police headquarters was a very serious problem. If press and the public learned about a second wallet, they would quickly suspect this was a throwdown wallet that conveniently appeared at the Tippit murder scene for the purpose of framing Oswald as the man who murdered Officer Tippit. When the public and or press began to realize that Oswald was being framed for Tippit's murder, they would also wonder if Oswald was also being framed for President Kennedy's murder. Fritz, Westbrook, and possibly other high-ranking police personnel understood this second wallet was a serious problem and had to be hidden from the public. They had to cover up the second wallet, hide Westbrook's involvement, hide Fritz's knowledge of the wallet,